Okay. To talk about how I balance my full-time job is with the work of council and sort of some of that work-life balance. And I would say that one of the things I do, and I have two thoughts about this, having been in private practice when I first started, and then now having a full-time employer with the university, is it was really important for me to set the time aside. That this is a commitment, and it's going to take a significant amount of time to be able to do this at certain times of the year. So with my employer, I made sure that my employer was on board with me doing this. They were going to provide me with the time and the support to be able to come and attend council meetings, as well as to be able to attend committees. And part of that is helping my employer understand what the benefit of me doing this is, how I can contribute, but also what I can bring back. And the ways in which, for me personally, my work in council helps to inform my teaching, my supervision, and my clinical practice is really important. So I think getting an employer buy-in is important. As a self-employed person, what I found I needed to do was treat this like getting new clients. I had to set the time aside in my schedule to be able to make sure that I had the time to be able to do it. So it wasn't just trying to fit it in as I went along. I would just say, the other thing I would just say is that I think, and I know we're going to get to this a little bit later with the committee work and so on, but it's really about being able to organize the time. If my time in council has taught me anything, I am a much better organized person in terms of managing my time and being proactive about what I need to do. That's good.
And we'll move on to how council works. So as we've noted, much of council's work is done at a committee level, and we have 9 committees listed here. Most committees meet for plenary meetings about 4 times per year, so that really varies on depending on the committee. Some committees obviously meet more frequently than others. And those committee members also participate in panels as needed to review more complex or irregular applications for registration and dealing with complaints about a member's professional conduct or competence, among other concerns. So we're going to speak more about panel and meeting preparation in a few more slides. This is to just give you a sense of the committees that the college has and how the committees work together with council. So the work that's done by these committees feeds into the work that is done by council. Committees do the work that's involved in developing and drafting policies and guidelines, and once these documents are finalized, they're presented to council for further input and approval. So council members are appointed to committees for a 1-year term for capacity building and expertise, and reappointments after that 1 year are often considered, and the appointments are made primarily with the needs of the college at the forefront, then more particular expertise of council members and their competencies, and how that expertise can then add to the needs of the committee is also considered. And we do take an individual's interest into account where it's possible.
Okay, so I'm a fairly new member to council. So at the beginning of I wasn't actually prepared for the time commitment, I think. And so I quickly actually put together a system on my calendar, a color-coded system where I denote the CRPO meetings, and then I just book my client time around that. And because I'm self-employed, it's been going fairly smoothly. In regards to meeting prep, I find that preparing for a meeting is less time consuming than preparing for a panel, for example. but both really depend on the volume of material to be read and reviewed. So since I'm fairly new to the council, I'm still finessing the best way to prepare for me. But generally, I ensure that I create a locked folder for all my materials on any given meeting. And then over the 2 weeks leading up to the meeting, I will read the material, make notes, put together any questions or comments that I might have, and then to all meetings I bring my computer so I can access and open the files at the meeting versus bringing printed paper copies, for example.
Great. Thank you, Miranda. Kevin, if you want to add your experiences with the work involved in panels and preparation.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. And I would just agree with everything Miranda said. I think those are all really good things that were said there. A couple thoughts I have. One is the difference between sort of preparing for council versus preparing for committees. One of the things I do when the council package comes, I got to say, staff is really good at preparing these council packages. We are so well prepared, and the information arrives to us in time enough for us to be able to review it. If you start at the beginning of the 2 weeks, if you leave it till the night before, like anything, you're kind of in trouble. But the packages are extremely well organized, and so I can easily go through a council package and say, what do I need to read this for information that I just need to know in advance? And what do I need to read because I have questions, or I have thoughts, or I want to put an idea forward, or perhaps there's something I want to go and do some research on for myself to prepare myself for the meeting. Committees are different, and I chair the ICRC, which is the Inquiries, Reports, and Reports Committee, and the volume there can be quite extensive. So the preparation time is often much longer. I actually need to schedule that in to my work day to make sure I'm spending those hours, and I mean hours, reviewing that information. And in those cases, I'm reading to prepare. I'm reading for my thoughts that I want to bring forward to the committee, the concerns I have, how I might suggest we respond to a particular complaint or so on. I am not doing any research beyond that. I think it's really important for people to know is that you can only deal with committees, you can only deal with the information that is before you. So this idea of blocking time off, again, becomes really, really important.
I just want to add that, sorry, Miranda speaking, I just wanted to add to that although I haven't been involved in many cases thus far, I have found that the cases that I've sat in on typically just go forward only if sufficient evidence or sufficient information is provided. And I have found that CRPO is very diligent in ensuring that everything is thoroughly gone through and that there's enough information to make a decision on, which I find really helpful.
Great, thank you, Kevin.
Amy, can I add one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. So generally what we do is you get preparation time for a meeting, and generally that goes, you get the same amount of preparation time as the length of the meeting. So if it's a day-long meeting, you get a day's worth of preparation. What I find with council is it usually doesn't take me a day to prepare for council. With the committee, depending on the committee, so I also sit in the examination committee, I find it doesn't take me as long to go through the examination information as it does, say, for what you would find for ICRC or perhaps registration, where you're having to go through more information. So for a day-long ICRC meeting, I might actually put in 2 days of preparation to be really prepared for those meetings.
All right, great. So one of the questions that we get quite a bit from people who are interested in running for election is whether or not elected council members are required to attend all meetings in person. So in-person attendance at council meetings is required, and council meets 4 times per year with meeting dates that are scheduled well in advance, and all members' schedules are considered when we're booking those dates. So there's lots of time to make any in-person arrangements. And in many instances, for committee and panel meetings, it's acceptable to attend those meetings by teleconference or video conference, particularly if you have to travel a long distance to attend in person. And you can always discuss the attendance requirements and the attendance options with your committee chair. And Kevin and Miranda, I don't know if you want to add to this slide and maybe discuss the flexibility of the committee meetings and the benefits of attending by video conference or by teleconference versus in person.
I can speak a bit to that. First of all, I want to say I love the fact that the staff at CRPO tries to set the meetings well in advance and for the entire year if possible, because that just helps me organize my calendar and work around it. And from my perspective, the meeting schedule and form of attendance has been actually really flexible, both in understanding that if I cannot make it to a meeting and I need to teleconference, that is fine. I've only had one teleconference meeting thus far, and my experience of it was that it was very efficient. However, if I had to choose which I would prefer, it would be to meet in person. And that's probably just because I'm a therapist and I prefer to be relational and in the room with people. But both ways work for me.
Great, thank you, Miranda.
I would add to that. So I've attended meetings in person. I've attended them by teleconference, where everybody's on teleconference. I've attended where just I'm on the phone. I've also attended where everybody's on a video conference, or I'm just on a video conference, or somebody is. And I think part of this depends on your comfortability with the technology. Some people find that easier thing to do, particularly if you do that a lot in your life. If you're not doing that a lot in your life, then it may be more of a challenge. I also think it depends on the meetings. And, you know, we went to in-person for council meetings because it just begins, it's really difficult sometimes to have a conversation collectively when some people are on the phone and so on, and the technology doesn't always work as well. And I would say, again, having attended teleconferences for a committee like examination, I find it can work better. Or the committee I chair for the Inquiries, Reports, and Complaints Committee, because we're dealing with a volume of information, complex information, that being present at those meetings actually works a lot better. And in part, to Miranda's point about being a therapist, as a chair, I like to be able to look around the room and get a sense of what are people's body language and responses to the information that we're dealing with, to make sure that we are doing a really due diligence to the work, both in the public interest, but also for the complainant and for the member, that we're providing the best response possible.
So moving on, once again, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin and Miranda to talk about the pros and the cons and some of the challenges that come with being a member of CRPO Council.
I think the pro for me has always been it's the opportunity to give back, the opportunity to help build and shape the profession. This is to me, this is really exciting work. And I think, you know, it's exciting for people who have an interest in having some influence on and people who really like sort of policy development, that kind of thing, which I love that stuff. So I would say it's a real pro for me. And I've always sort of one of my taglines with the College of the Council has always been that we are incredibly diverse. We're such a diverse representation of members that we have. Our college is unique in that way. The models that people practice from, the different associations that you know are involved, it's very diverse. And so the pro for me is I get to hear how other people work and how they think about therapy and how they think about psychotherapy, and that's generative and educational for me. So those are the pros. For me, there are two cons. One is that I go through periods where I don't have a lot of contact. And then suddenly I've got a couple committees and I've got all this work to do. And I'm suddenly highly invested and I'm involved and so on. And then it kind of goes quiet. I find that up and down a bit of a challenge sometimes, because I find it hard to hold on to some of the threads of the things that were important to me at a meeting I wanted to hold on to. If it's council, 3-4 months later, it's hard for me to kind of remind myself of what that is. So I have to have a good way of being able to track it. So that's a con. The other con, I don't know if this is a con or really if it's a challenge, but I think it took a while for me, way back in the transitional phase, to really get clear in the role of council. And Amy highlighted this earlier, that we're really there for the public interest. We're not there to represent ourselves or to represent our associations or our model of working or a specific interest. We're there for the public interest. And I think that's a challenge sometimes, particularly if we're passionate about something, is how we bring things forward, reminding ourselves that it is what I'm wanting or seeking in the public interest. And the other, and I've learned this a lot in my 9 years here, that I don't always get what I want. Things don't always go the way I want, and that's fine. And I've learned that's not only is that fine, that has to be fine, but in fact, that it is fine, because again, the diversity of who we're working with needs to be considered in all of our decisions.
Kevin answered that so well. I would just add to that I've actually been thankful to come on board as a new member and have all of these people who are already there with such experience and as guidance on how to wind my way through this. But I would say, just in general, I really enjoy being able to add my voice to the council, coming from the perspective of one of the regulated therapists in the field. And it's really, I've been able to broaden my view of it, because I see that there's many perspectives that need to be taken into account when looking at these things. So it really is what's the word? It's in assistance to the public, and I really do have a focus on that. So it's been a good experience for me.
So now by this point, maybe you're thinking that you can contribute to CRPO Council. Now what? So there are some administrative requirements, like completing the candidate information and nomination package and obtaining signatures from 5 CRPO members. So when you complete the package, you just want to download it, save it to your desktop, complete it, and send it back to us. I can post the links after the webinar to where you can find those things on our website. I also wanted to make note of the work that the Nominations and Elections Committee has been doing to help grow our resources for elections. And one of those resources, obviously, is this webinar, and another is the Nomination and Elections Guide. So that was recently posted on our website, and it has sort of all the frequently asked questions and a guide on how our elections are conducted in accordance with our bylaws. And there's a lot of great information there for you to reference as well if you're considering running for council, or if you know somebody who would be a great fit. The elections section of our website is growing, and lots of great member outreach stuff is taking place. So I think right now, if Kevin and Miranda could maybe talk about one of the questions that we get from quite a few people who are considering running for election is perhaps they don't know 5 CRPO members, or they sort of have difficulty getting signatures of support for their nomination. So maybe Kevin and Miranda, if you could touch on how you go about asking people to support you and address addressing the whole sort of issue of, but I don't know 5 RPs in my community. I don't know if either of you have anything to contribute to that.
I can speak to that from actually a very personal standpoint. One of the reasons that I decided to run for election was, if I go back, last year I was actually one of the therapists that was randomly selected to participate in the peer and practice review. So I had a remote interview, and of course I went into my big fear around that. And from a personal standpoint, I'm actually very proud that I walked towards this imagined fear, and I was proactive, and having gone through that process, I found it very empowering, and the fear was just gone. So when I decided to run for election, I was just coming out of my peer and practice review, and many of my peers knew how that experience impacted me. So when I ran for council, I came at it from a personal point of view and explained how it was almost an empowering journey for me, and many people could resonate with that. So for me, getting five names was easy. I do have access to a wide circle of peers and mentors. I asked a few of my mentors, and I do meet with a peer group regularly. So I was able to get the 5 signatures fairly easily. Now, it was a little bit harder to get those signatures to the CRPO. Some people I just didn't have time to meet with before the deadline, and they were able to fill out the form and give me their signature and send it back via, technology. So, but I did call each person individually, and every person was more than willing to sign. And then I simply brought the signature page to several of them to get signed, and then 2 of them were sent electronically.
So one thing I wanted, and you sort of alluded to this, is this idea of, do I have something to offer? And I would say to anybody who's sort of questioning that, if you're a practicing psychotherapist in Ontario, you work in a hospital or a university or an agency or private practice, you have an interest in contributing to and building the profession, if you have some passion, then you have something to contribute. And I would strongly encourage people to do that. And I would say, I haven't had a problem in finding five people, because I'm fairly well connected in my community, but also having been on council. But I would say that if you don't think you know 5 RPs, my guess is you probably do. And that even if you were to go through in your area, Psychology Today or something, and find out who the RPs are, you probably recognize people have been working. I would cold call them up and say, hey, here's who I am. I've been working in this community for this long length of time. I'd really like to, put my name forward for council election. Would you support it? Here's why I want to do it. And I think, one, that's a good way of networking. But the other is, I think you'll find that people will support that. So if you don't think you know 5 people, go and introduce yourself to 5 people.
Great, that's great advice. Thank you, Kevin. So moving on to our next slide, some other examples of things that you need to keep in mind when you're considering running for election is that you do have to meet the eligibility criteria in the bylaws. Some of that criteria includes sort of basic things like having a valid certificate of registration from the CRPO, that you're not in a temporary class of registration, you're not in default of any fees or information that are owed to the college. So those are, make sure you check off all your boxes, and all of this information is included in the nomination package, so you can literally check off all of the requirements that you meet. In addition, you're required to complete a conflict of interest questionnaire. So ultimately, if you think something could be a conflict, declare it, and Details on what is a conflict of interest are also noted in the nominations package. And just because you have a conflict doesn't necessarily exclude you from running for election. And finally, you'll need to write a compelling candidate statement. The candidate statements are 300 words or less. And just a friendly reminder that council members serve the public interest, so don't make any grandiose statements for change, because council really speaks with one voice. And if you need any assistance when you're completing the nominations package, you can always contact me at elections@crpo.ca, and I can walk you through that process. Some important dates to remember if you are considering running for election. The notice of elections, that's when the nomination period opens. So the nomination period opens on March 22nd. That's when you can start submitting your nomination packages, all completed, to the college, and you have until April 23rd to submit your nomination. Then those nominations are verified by the nominations committee shortly thereafter, and the online election opens for voting on May 22nd, and the last day to vote is June 21st at 5 p.m., the first day of summer. Here are the districts that are up for election this year. So you can see we have District 6, Central West, so if you're located in the region of Peel. District 7 covers the Greater Toronto area, and District 8 is the whole province of Ontario. And maybe just note that the District 6 seat is a by-election, so that term, whoever is elected in District 6 would serve a 2-year term, whereas the District 7 and District 8 seats are for a 3-year term, which is the standard. When members are elected to council, they serve a 3-year term. So I just wanted to add actually something else about the districts. We do have some district maps on our elections webpage. If you aren't sure which district you're located in, alternatively, you can log into your CRPO user account and click on the elections tab to find out which district you're in. And finally, just want to make note that even if you don't end up running for election or you don't win in the district that you're running in, there are lots of other opportunities for members to contribute to the college if they're not elected. I know that in the future, like, we're looking for peer assessors. Their non-council member appointments occasionally come up, and supervisors, things like that. So do consider getting involved with the college.
The other way for members to get involved is when there are public consultations. And I think it's really important for people to know that every response to a public consultation is reviewed, looked at, and considered. Often, I think with those things, people worry that if they put something out, oh, it'll get lost, nobody will really pay attention to it. That's not the case. So I think that's another way that members can really provide some input.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way for members to engage. And we do have a public consultation open right now on the bylaws, so if you're interested in providing feedback on that. So one of the questions that we have is, are the meetings in Toronto, from Amanda? And yes, all the meetings are held in Toronto. The council meetings are all in person at the CRPO office in Toronto. As I mentioned before, the committee meetings have a little bit more flexibility, but when the committee meetings are in person, they are held in Toronto. Another question that we have is it better to start off as a committee member before considering running for election, and how do I join a committee? So I think it's important to keep in mind that all of our council members serve on our committees. So once you're elected to a council, you're then appointed to a committee. So that is how you would get involved in a committee. Alternatively, if you don't want to be an elected member of council, you can apply to be a non-council member. So non-council members are appointed to specific committees based on the needs of the college, the needs of the committee, and that is one way that you could join a committee without being, without being an elected member of council. If a council member has previously been on a board of a professional association, does it change the relationship with those members or their association?
I can jump into that, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I was previously on the board of a professional association. In fact, I was the executive director. And so I think, again, as what we spoke about earlier, it's reminding yourself of what your role with council is, that you're there to represent the public interest. You're not there to represent an organization. So I think where it changes the role is in some ways needing to distance ourselves from those organizations. Obviously can't sit on an organization, professional association and council. And that to remind yourself that you are there in the public interest and not as an extension of your association. And that sometimes means when your association calls you and says, well, what about this or what about that? You need to be able to say something like, you know, those are great ideas. Perhaps you would like to write a letter to the college or the council and ask those questions. Those are not things I can bring forward on your behalf. So being able to sort of set those boundaries are important, and that's is so that we're not seen as perceived to be in any kind of conflict of interest.
So another question that we have is, I ran previously and was not elected. If I wish to run again, do I have to repeat the entire process? Yes, you do. You can complete the nomination form. It's already posted on our website, so you will have to complete it every time you run. And I believe those are the only questions that we've got. So I want to thank everybody for logging in and taking the time to listen to what we have to say, and hopefully this encourages you to, whether it be, you know, running for election or getting involved with the college in any other ways that we described. So thank you very much, and thank you to Kevin and Miranda for contributing today. You guys, thank you so much.